Dr. McKenna, what are you thinking about today?
So, Sab, I think you've heard this story, but a few years ago, I think it was 2020, I was invited to go speak at a conference called The Great Conversation by a friend named Ron Warman. And show up, get off the plane, and I took a red eye to Florida. And I jump into this conversation, and I knew it was security leaders. I gotta tell you, I did not fully understand what I was getting myself into. I'm not sure I really understood that I knew the difference, but what was going on in that room when I walked in, there's 200 or 300 security leaders, and I kind of made this assumption that it was a mixture of cyber and physical security, but it was physical security. So they were leaders in all kinds of corporate contexts. And so I sat down at one of the tables. This is before I'm supposed to go up on it. I literally jump off the plane. I go to this, I get there and I sit down next to this guy and I asked him, I go, so can you give me a little context real quick for what's happening in the room right now? And he shows me, he brings up on his iPad this picture of the globe. And it showed, and he works for a major corporation. He was the chief security officer. And so he's showing me every hotspot in the world where something is going on, and he's responsible for the safety of every person in the company and to sort of manage that whole process and system. And I tell you that because it was a powerful moment for me. And I started asking him questions about himself, and he came out of a special ops kind of background, military background. And he's like, and I go, oh, so you're like, your life's like a Netflix story. And he's like, yeah. So he starts, and it was kind of this powerful moment for me, but even more powerful than kind of realizing who I was in the room with was this realization that hit me. And now I have lots of these kinds of friends who come out of law enforcement or security or military backgrounds. A lot of them will talk about the sheep and the sheepdogs, and you have to have both in the world. And this realization that so many people don't think about, that the people who are responsible for creating trust and guarding the gates have a very tough job, and that these are human beings who are responsible for things that some of us don't have to think about every day, and that the investment in the human beings who do these kinds of things, who actually create an infrastructure for trust and a place where we're not only safe but where we also can move about freely, gave me a deep heart, as you know, and I know you share this too, Sab, for our friends and leaders across those spaces. And it's one of the reasons that I am super psyched for this conversation today. So let's get this going.
Welcome to the Wild Conversation, where human being and human doing converge, reshaping the world of leadership, culture, and performance. Today, we get to have a wild conversation with Nick Lavery. Nick is a U.S. Army Special Forces warrant officer, combat leader, and one of the most compelling voices on resilience, trust, and what it really takes to perform under pressure. As a Green Beret, Nick has operated in some of the most complex and dangerous environments in the world. After losing his leg in combat, he didn't retreat from the fight. He redefined what was possible, becoming the first above-the-knee amputee in U.S. military history to return to combat with Special Forces. But Nick is more than a decorated warrior. He's a student of human performance, a teacher of grit, and a leader who understands that success in high-stakes moments is as much about inner strength and trust as it is about tactics and training. His book, Objective Secure, captures the mindset that carried him through recovery, return, and continued service. Today, we're excited to explore with Nick what resilience really looks like, how trust is built when failure isn't an option, and what his journey can teach us about becoming stronger, steadier, and more whole. Nick, thanks for being with us today.
I got to tell you, Sab, Rob, I've done a lot of podcasts and interviews. That right there was by far the best introduction I have ever heard in my life. I'm humbled listening to that. In fact, if you're unwilling to send me the script of what you just read, I'm going to listen to this recording. I'm going to document it. I'm going to find a way to use that moving forward. I'm already impressed. Hey, it's great to see you guys. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. Rob, Sab, you guys are both awesome. Let's get into it, man.
Right
Yeah.
on. Right on.
Stoked for this conversation. We didn't prep you for this, Nick, but this is one of the funnest parts for me of the Wild Conversation podcast. We're going to play a quick round of wild cards. We have a deck of 52. Each has a different question on it, and I just pulled 10. And I'm just going to shuffle them right now. So how it works is we'll choose a number and I'll pull a card. I'll go first, choose a number, pull a card. I'll answer the question. You'll go next, Nick, and Rob will round us out. Just answer from your gut. If the story comes to mind, feel welcome to share it. Or if you can answer in 2 to 3 words, we'll take that too. All right. I'm going to shuffle the deck and choose number 2. It says, what do you need to do today to get to where you want to be tomorrow? I have this notepad right here, and it says prioritize and execute on it. And this is what I need to do today. Just honestly, it's a check off the boxes kind of day, so that when I get to tomorrow, I can continue great conversations. So,
Boom.
Right on. Right on.
all right, Nick, choose a number.
4.
All right. Number 4 is, what do others with whom you work need from you that you feel underqualified to provide?
Ooh, others that I work with, they need something from me that I feel underqualified to provide. Is that what that said?
Yeah, just a light conversation to kick us off.
Okay, yeah, we're going deep early. Okay, I'll take it on. You know, I'll use a conversation I just had recently with a couple of my team members that are in leadership positions, and it was the discussion that it circulates around the difference between leadership and management. And oftentimes management gets kind of a bad rap. And certainly in like leadership development firms, it's like, you don't want to be a manager, you want to be a leader, which I can understand. I would argue that most winning organizations have a healthy combination of both strong leaders and then strong managers. And as I've continued to evolve and kind of learn the difference between the two, most people are noticeably stronger at one versus the other. It doesn't mean that you can't do both, but very few people are like at like a 50-50 split. Most are stronger towards one, and having that degree of self-awareness and humility and honesty can help position you to continue to accelerate that and or place a little bit more emphasis in the other arena should that require more effort out of you to better serve the organization. And so I've been reflecting on this myself as someone who practices what he preaches. And I've learned, I say this humbly, is that I'm a stronger leader than I am a manager. And we can, of course, dissect kind of the difference between the two. But I think generally speaking, managers are great at kind of more direct control over things or people to create a specific task outcome. So more of like your tacticians of, I need you 3 to take the hill. I need you 3 to go left. You go right. We'll go center and we'll merge on the objective and then we're going to win. So more like tactics versus leadership, which is more about enabling, inspiring, and influencing others to create organizational success. So maybe a little broader, a little bit more strategic versus management, which is typically more kind of down and in. And I'm making this much simpler than it actually is. These are two really great philosophies. So kind of bring this back around to the question. There are times in our organization that require strong management, and I am oftentimes in that seat, and I recognize that I'm not quite as strong in that role as I am a leader. I'd rather ask more questions and gain more insights and get more buy-in and kind of help lead or influence someone to get towards that ultimate decision-making point versus me simply saying, just do this and go and like it's going to work. So oftentimes my team looks to me for that kind of management function, and I'll fill the role the best I can. But I do realize that I am not nearly as strong in that realm as I am as a leader.
I love that. Thank you for that.
Great question.
Yeah.
I was like, Nick, like we usually we don't pause here, but I got to pause because I was thinking about how many people would resonate with exactly what you just described, including me. And it's so fascinating. So I'm gonna hold on to a question around that because I have another question with that. Good golly, that was well said. I think a lot of people feel that. All right, Sab, I'll go with number 8.
All right. All right. Number 8 says, what are you taking personally today that likely has nothing to do with you?
Good golly.
Mm,
Nick, these questions, like
it's a good one.
I had a hand in writing them, and it's always evergreen, and fresh. I think one of the things is, like, if I'm honest, and I'll try to be, is that when you're a part of work that feels so deeply missional, it is personal. On a deeper level. And so sometimes that can actually get in the way of kind of just maybe patience and just kind of resting in what is, as opposed to the drive for what could be.
Mm,
And so I think maybe something I'm working on, especially in these moments of impact of our team and our organization, and sometimes taking it, it is personal. And so you take it personal, and then it ends up getting in the way a little bit, And so that's my best answer at this point, Sab, to that question. Thank you. Golly, Nick, I'm super excited for this conversation. But I want to ask you a follow-up to what you just said, because I'm curious, was that same dynamic in you? Does it occur in a military context and a civilian context? Like, do you see that same thing? Because it's funny. I think that when many people would think of you, they would think of you as an operational leader also. And I'm curious about whether that same part of you that is kind of your natural tendency, if that's the way you would describe it, is occurred in both places.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And again, I think strong teams are strong teams, whether you're in the corporate environment, military environment, the law enforcement world. I think that having a healthy combination of strong leaders and managers is what allows teams to continue to win with success. And so for me, coming in as an enlisted guy and being at the very bottom of kind of that food chain and just being a student of the game and kind of eventually kind of working my way up the chain, not just with my rank, but my role on the detachment, that's oftentimes is more management tactician. Certainly as a Green Beret, we work, with and through indigenous personnel. We're considered force multipliers. So we get linked up with 100 or 200 or 500, indigenous individuals. And our job is to lead, manage, and lead them and move into combat or problem solving to create a specific outcome. And so earlier in my career, it was a lot more management. It was a lot more, giving more specific guidance. Here, load your rifle this way. Everyone do it. Okay, cool. Hey, we're going to do this battle drill. You guys go left, you go right, etc. That was what was asked of me, and I did my function. But I think one of the major draws to me becoming a warrant officer, as Sab mentioned in the introduction, was because I felt more comfortable and I was drawn more towards a more abstract leadership type function versus a hardened tactician management role. And so when you're making the transition from being an enlisted soldier or service member in the Army to a warrant officer in special forces, you are being assessed as your ability to be a detachment commander. That's what they're looking at. And the role of a detachment commander is really to determine what we are going to do and effectively communicate that to the detachment. Once that's done, your job is to get out of the way and then let the boys go to work. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes I see detachment commanders make, and I've done this myself as I've been in that role, is being too involved in the tactical realm. You want to get your hands dirty. Really very few soldiers want to just like sit back and do nothing while everyone else is working. You want to be actively engaged. So there's this draw to like get in the mix. And it's like, no. You did your job here. You effectively communicated what the desired end state is. Now let them go to work. And so I felt drawn to that, which I think is what was part of me wanting to become a warrant officer, is because I would rather lead than manage. I would rather get insights, invest into the personal development of individuals, leverage my values, more so than, hey, I've done this a whole bunch of times. This is probably going to work. Just do it this way, and it'll likely pay off. Again, I can do it. I have done it, but it's just not what I'm drawn to.
What is a warrant officer?
That's a good question. It's actually one that a lot of soldiers actually ask as well.
Oh, good, good. I don't feel so bad then.
No,
Okay.
you shouldn't. It's a very
Okay.
common question. There are soldiers that have been in the Army 20 plus years that still aren't entirely sure what warrant officers do. So
Okay.
the warrant officer in the Army, you could summarize it as they are a systems expert. That would
Okay.
probably be the most concise way to explain what that is. And rather than going the traditional route of an enlisted soldier or an officer where you're kind of moving around quite a bit, it's like, you're really good at this one system. Let's just keep you in that system indefinitely. So you become this sense of like continuity as commanders are swapping out or senior enlisted guys are swapping in and out. You just maintain a role in that particular function in that system. Army special forces warrant officers are wildly unique than every other warrant officer in the Army. It's actually the only ground combat oriented warrant officer that exists in the United States Army. The system in which a special forces warrant officer is a quote expert in is the detachment. It's the
Mm,
special forces detachment. That organism is the system in which we specialize in. And so what that actually ends up translating to in reality is we do serve as that continuity as the commander is swapping on and off the team every 18 to 24 months. We are the long-term visionary thinkers. We're thinking 18 months into the future for training requirements, personnel management, the next deployment that's coming up. While the boys are largely focused down and in, usually around like a 90-day-ish window on all the things that need to get done day in and day out, and they're making those things happen. Warrant officers are looking much longer term into the future. And then the second major component that we bring is we are considered like the safety officers for the detachment, which basically means that we are responsible for risk calculus and risk management. And so we give the commander that kind of advice, those kinds of recommendations, both in terms of what we do, and then we give those same recommendations to the senior enlisted leader on the team in terms of how we do it.
okay. Okay. Thank you for that. That it makes a ton of sense now. And I mean, I know that there's a lot there. Okay, so before I get you're lighting me up, man. It's with so many questions, but I want to just to start off, Nick, will you what does a day or maybe the next month in the life of Nick Lavery look like right now? What does your world look like? How do you spend your time? Because I think people that are listening, they're trying to understand like, okay, I get this part, the military background of Nick, but you have other stuff going on. And so I'd love for you to just describe the fabric of your life right now.
Yeah, it's almost this constant state of transition to a degree. Once you get into business, it's like things are happening and you're pivoting and you're making these adjustments. So it's a unique time for me, however, because I did just recently, about a month ago, started my early phase element of retiring out of the Army. So I'm an active duty soldier. I've been doing it. I'm coming up on 20 years. Took me about 6 months to fully land on the decision to exit and to actually retire, which was a really challenging decision to work through when you love what you do in the uniform
Mm,
and you feel a sense of purpose with that. Despite me loving what I get to do outside of the uniform and feeling a sense of purpose with that, it's a difficult crossroads to come to. And so it took a while. I made the decision. And I kind of just started that process right now. So most of my Army work these days is me going through medical appointments and really finally taking a look under the hood at some things with this entity, right, known as my body, that I've really put off for 20 years. And it's been a brutal wake-up call that I've become very stereotypical in the sense that when you're in the game and you're obsessed with being in that game, you can justify a lot of things, costs you're willing to take on the body, on the mind, on your personal life for the sake of the mission, for the sake of being there with the boys. And it comes with
yeah.
costs, physically,
Yeah.
mentally, emotionally, spiritually, right? Like, and so you can put these band-aids on some things or just flat out disregard them and just keep going and keep going and keep going. And that's easy to compound because there's this sense of nobility with what you're doing. I'm putting the needs of the team above my own. I'm putting the needs of the mission above my own. And that's a noble thing to get behind. It just also comes with some costs. And so a lot of us, it really takes getting towards that last evolution of your career for you to really start to take a look at some of those things. And that
Yeah.
can be a brutal awakening. So a lot of my Army work is that, and then I have the privilege of now running a several different business entities, which I do primarily out of the office I'm in right now, which has been amazing. And, I think a lot of guys, when they get close to retirement, they kind of kick that can down the road quite a bit. And then they find themselves in this lull between being an active duty soldier, service member, and being a civilian. And then they're like, well, what am I going to do? And that can get kind of ugly, kind of fast. So I've been blessed to kind of front load that quite a bit and been slowly side hustle nights and weekends, just kind of grinding away at this entrepreneurial life for the last like 5 years. And so I'm blessed. There's enough momentum where I feel strongly it'll be a nice glide path where this just becomes the 100% bandwidth investment in my professional life. And then lastly, to round this thing out, and most significantly, is I'm a husband and a father. We were talking
Yeah.
offline before we started
Yeah.
recording.
Yeah.
My wife is currently out of town on business. So I'm getting the opportunity to invest more in our kids and our boys. And that's it, man. That's what a typical day in the life looks like for me these days.
One thing that I'm curious about is that transition moment, because in a different way, I spent 25 years I was in a university setting. So I had this academic side of my life, but I never fully fit there, but I did live there. So I had this job in academics. And then also a lot of my work prior to 2020 was pretty corporate. So I had a lot of friends in those kinds of spaces and corporate kinds of roles and larger institutions. And then what was fascinating and it shifted was I left academics in 2020. And when I say academics, I mean, I was running a graduate program to train other graduate students to do the work that I do. So I was deeply embedded in my own culture or guild of industrial organizational psychology. So that's when you were talking, I'm like imagining you coming out of such a powerful cultural story,
Yeah.
that surrounds you. And it's been fascinating, Nick, because a couple of things that shifted is, and I don't even know if it's okay to bring up the pandemic. Some people are like, I don't want to ever hear the word again, but it's like, but one of the things that shifted for us was we started to work with a lot of smaller to mid cap businesses in the trades, because like during the pandemic, plumbing companies were growing like crazy and they're trying to figure out, how do I transition a plumber into a leader? So we started working with farming equipment businesses, and I've always been, and it fit for me because I've always been kind of I didn't end up in the trades, but on some level I relate. And so it was like this whole world opened up of small to mid cap businesses, but also getting out of academics. And man, good golly, I've learned a lot about myself in that process. You know what I mean? Of understanding like things I didn't see because of the culture I was embedded in. And there's so many lessons that I've had to shift. And I'm curious about with you, what are you learning about yourself? Because it's not often you get to talk to somebody who's already started that transition, but you're also in the middle of it, because the middle can be years, right?
Sure.
Like, so what are you learning about yourself in the middle of that moment, of that movement from one to the other that's been taking place for a bit?
The thing that jumps out as you ask the question is both the parallels coming from a military background and a special operations world and into the realm of business. The verbiage is different, but a lot of the methodologies, the philosophies, the approach is the exact same. We may call it a different thing, but it's the same stuff. At the end of the day, you are in the problem solving business. Like, that's it. And so, like, whether you're selling t-shirts or executive coaching or consulting, like, you identify a problem and you come up with a solution. You identify a pain point, you come up with a solution. Like that's it. And so there's a lot of similarities between the two. And so what I've had a lot of fun doing is kind of translating 20 years of my knowledge repository and merging that into the realm of running a corporate business entity. One of the major differences, and this speaks to culture.
I'm curious
as
about why you giggle when you say that. You're like,
yeah, I mean, this
major.
speaks to culture. This speaks to knowing your operational environment. It speaks to leadership and team building. There's a lot of elements to this. Is, what's normal for us in the team room. And I'm not just talking about like the particular words that we use, which is wildly different. Like if you walked into a corporate setting and you talk to a colleague the way that me and one of my teammates will talk to each other in the team room, like not only are you likely to get fired, but you may have like a lawsuit against you. But in that realm, it's like totally normal.
Yeah.
This is done with love and respect. It's just the way we talk. It's very blunt. It's very direct. And it's more speaking to that, where I come from a place, and this ties directly into trust here as we evolve this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Me and the 11 other guys on that team, all of them are fire and forget assets, period. You give a specific task, or a specific task is given or required. Someone is identified right there and then you no longer have to think about that at all until it's done. That's it. Boom, go, forget about it. Is there a need to check in at times? Maybe, but like these assets they get the thing, they're ready to go. In fact, a lot of times they're physically fighting each other for the task. That could be something as mundane as sweeping the team room, like hungry for work, hungry for ownership of a task. And that I want you to leave me alone and let me go accomplish this. I will come to you if I need something. So it's blunt, it's direct. There's very little confusion on who owns what. You get into kind of the more traditional corporate professional environment, and even just some of the verbiage that we use. This came up on a call with some of my team members just a couple of weeks ago, where it's these like, let's do this, or like, we need to do this, this like collective language that we use. And then it can just end there. And I'm like, wait a minute, who's doing what? We just said, let's do this. We need to do this. This is something we need to take a look at. Like, who's we? Like, we're not leaving this call until someone has been identified as owning this thing. But without that degree of just blunt, no, hold on. Like, no, we're not done. Who's doing what, and when will it can expect it to be done by? You, Roger that, execute. If it's left in this like warm and fuzzy, vague, like we collective, like I get it, it makes us all feel good, but it can lead to a lot of confusion, a lot of redundancy, a lot of missteps, a lot of time wasted. So just having the respect and the understanding of the team that we can talk to each other very directly. That doesn't mean we have to use full letter words or expletives. Like, you can have professional conversations, but just be like, hey, Rob, you're owning this project, right? Yes, cool. Like, when do you think it'll be done? Give me 2 weeks. Sounds good. 2 weeks done, fire and forget. I don't plan on hearing from Rob until then, unless he needs me. So just a lot of similarities, philosophy, methodology, tactics, tools, techniques. But when it comes to the inner workings, the relationship dynamics of how we interact with each other, that is something that I've learned over the last 5 years, that it's not the same world. And as the leader, a leader, it's your responsibility to understand your operational environment and adjust as needed to create the impact and the influence on the rest of the team.
Okay. Good golly. So in which environment that you just described, and maybe this is oversimplified, but is trust easier to build?
Oh, that's a tough one, man. Which is it easier to build? I'm not sure if I could just give a flat answer, one versus the other. I mean, on one hand, what's at stake in the realm of military special operations is literally life and death. Okay. And so the stakes are really high. If we fail at something in business, do we lose money? Are jobs at stake? I get it. There are consequences. But to measure those two things next to each other, one isn't even remotely close to the other, which I've been able to leverage as, we make these challenges and we fail and we mess up and it's frustrating. I can just be like, you know what? No one is shooting a machine gun at any of us right now. Like, let's just keep this in perspective. We're going to all be just fine. And so, I can use that. Yeah. So the stakes are really high over here.
Yeah.
Another thing that comes to mind is, I think if you get down to some of the core of trust, and this is your world more so than mine, it's rooted in safety. Do I feel safe with this person? If I am empowering this individual to do something, do I feel like my job is safe? If this person is left at home, my home with my family, and I leave for a week, do I feel like my family is going to be safe? Like, do I trust that individual? Meaning, do I feel safe enough that the outcome is something that I'm willing to accept within that individual? In the realm of special operations, you're talking about people that have been through an enormous degree of different filters and interview processes and selections, and they've gone through a lot of really difficult things. And so I think that there's another layer, another degree of discipline, emotional control, emotional regulation, what someone is willing to sacrifice, delayed gratification, all these character traits and performance attributes that make us as great as we are at what we do are also directly correlated to being able to establish trust in an individual. Like if I feel confident that when you are met with temptation, whatever that is, that
Yeah.
you're willing to choose the hard right over the easy wrong, which is the definition of discipline. If I
Yeah.
feel confident in your ability to do that, my trust in you just skyrocketed, whether you're at my home with my kids without me, or you're going to go do this thing that if it doesn't go great, it could cost me my job or my life. And so in the team world, you've got individuals that have had to prove those attributes at some of the most extreme levels. And then they all end up in that same realm at the same time. So I'm not going to suggest that one is necessarily
Yeah.
easier than the other because it is
Yeah.
difficult. There's difficult dynamics, but in the world of special operations, we do have those filters because without those character traits, like you're not in that role to begin with.
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our Wild Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational levels. We are building the largest database on the drivers of trust inside of organizations. This survey will inform growth imperatives and the necessary organizational change needed to fuel that growth. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.
You mentioned something that other friends of mine in the security industry have talked about often that I think is really helpful to repeat. I'd love to have you describe this. You mentioned risk management, and related to what you were just describing is that oftentimes I think people, when they don't think more deeply about the inner workings of trust, you take something like safety, is that we assume that, and these are strong cultural assumptions, that everyone should feel safe all the time. Like we had on Amy Edmondson was on the podcast, and she's just an amazing voice in the whole space of psychological safety. And I didn't know her well before that, and got to know her quite well. And one of the things, and she did some research and published an article in like 1999, and then wrote a book in 2016. And I didn't know her well enough to know, like, is she going to come around? Is she going to say that everyone needs to feel safe all the time? And which feels kind of ridiculous, because it's, you know what I mean? Like that doesn't allow for some permeability to allow us to actually be free. And so I think, could you talk a little bit about risk management, because both related to a person, but also a system, where a lot of people would assume that the goal is that we are completely safe. But what they don't think about is that if we're completely safe, then everything's locked down. We've lost all the freedom. And so people like you have been responsible for managing that paradox between how much risk are we willing to tolerate. You can say this better than I can, but will you describe what's that whole.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Rob, when you said that first sentence, I mean, there were 3 words in that statement that each one of them individually gives me like a buzz.
Uh-huh.
Meaning almost any use of an absolute term. And I start to like question that because rarely is that accurate. Oftentimes we sacrifice veracity for impact when we use absolute terms because it's more impactful.
Yeah.
If I say I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day, that's more impactful than I usually wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So we're willing to sacrifice veracity for impact, which I'm guilty of as well. You hear it all the time, especially in like marketing and sales and like whatever. That's fine. You just used 2 of those, right? Everybody and then all the time. And then the second one in the middle was the word should, which is one of the more slippery, dangerous words in the English lexicon, because my rebuttal is, well, should according to who or according to what?
Right.
Like, do you know enough about the subject, me, my priorities, my desires for you to say you should blank? It's like, ooh, that's a slippery slope. I think to suggest that everyone should be safe all the time is a blanket statement that I would probably argue against probably quite a bit, because I would suggest that if that's the case, opportunity at a minimum is going to be diminished significantly. There's a reason why high risk stocks can have huge payoffs. So oftentimes when it comes to risk mitigation, risk calculus, the focus is on minimizing hazards as much as possible, which is part of that equation. But you also need to recognize the opportunity that comes with more hazard. And so We are intentionally going to do something that could be perceived as more dangerous, that lowers safety or security because the potential outcome is huge. Are we willing to accept that ratio?
Yeah.
If there was not a likelihood of me losing my life or losing my limb, which happened, if that was removed from the table, I would not have wanted to be a Green Beret. In fact, 99% of our current active special operators came into this profession because it's dangerous. If it wasn't dangerous, we wouldn't want to do it. And
Hmm.
so the outcome, the opportunity, potential opportunity outcome by it being belligerently unsafe is you've got arguably the most lethal, capable force that the world has ever known. So huge opportunity. You're willing to assume some huge hazards that come along with that, but with that comes a huge outcome, potential outcome. And
Hmm.
so I think to suggest that we should all feel safe all the time, that's warm and, utopic and great. And listen, choose your own adventure. I think whether it's in military operations, in business, part of what makes that exciting and creates returns is your willingness to take unsafe choices on purpose. You recognize the hazards, but then you weigh that against the potential benefit of that should it work in your favor.
This is what you're just describing, Nick, has like massive streams of connection to research around development also. And it's one of the reasons I struggle when I see people sort of projecting a message that says everyone should feel safe all the time. I use the word hopefully tactfully there. And it's because development, like the development of leader capacity, what we know is that the most powerful experience for developing like that next level of leadership capacity actually happen in tremendous crucible experiences. Like things that, and I'm not talking about like this was a hard moment. I'm talking about moments that leaders said, I never want to experience this again. And yet it changed me to the core. You know what I mean? It changed me to the core. And so it is that, but it's a fascinating kind of paradox, right? This tension between enough safety. I don't even know the right way to say it, but it's like we're trying to, and risk management, and that's why friends like you say that so well. Can I ask you a related question? And this one, good golly, I keep saying good golly, Nick, because you're making me think, is that concept of vulnerability. And vulnerability, when I talk to leaders, I tell them, the definition of vulnerability, we don't really know what this word means, and we throw it around all the time, like trying to encourage leaders to be more vulnerable. But what it's the literal definition is the openness to being hurt.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to be vulnerable with you, there's a chance that you will hurt me with it. And yet, vulnerability is such a core part of building trust. Like, I'm so curious about your thoughts on vulnerability. I mean, all that you've been through, and what does that look like in a military context where people do assume like you are literally known as the machine, but that we're talking about machines, but we're not. We're talking about human beings who are in these roles. Like, how do you think about vulnerability?
I think it is on a spectrum, and we get to decide how much of that we throttle up versus throttle down. So dials, not switches. I don't think it's this on or off. It's not binary. It's on a spectrum. And
Yeah.
should we have a firm grasp of that dial, we then decide how much of us to expose ourselves to hurt to an individual. In the realm of special operations, it's a non-negotiable because you are literally going to turn your back to a known threat that is actively trying to take your life. And what allows you to do that is that you have allowed yourself to be vulnerable enough and trust enough in the three of your teammates that are standing between you and that threat, so you can deal with problem A, and that they would give their lives to protect you from problem B. And so that's just the nature of special operations in a small team dynamic. I would like, however, to take a crack at this as something that may be a little bit more relatable to maybe a broader audience. And I would, those of us that have, let's say a spouse or a significant other, you are entering into, and listen, we can all choose what this means to you, what the word marriage means or long-term relationship. Like we decide it's like a great thing, but I would argue that you are entering into what will be the most intimate, the most vulnerable state with any other human being on this planet, which is what makes it as amazing as it can be. It's also what sets you up for an unbelievable amount of pain and heartbreak and betrayal that can come
Yeah.
with it. These are some of the most powerful
Yeah.
detrimental emotions that we have as human entities, because you are giving a piece of yourself to that person. Like that person becomes your like chest plate, a means of protection between you and the world. Like an external entity can't hurt me nearly to the degree that my wife could, because I've given her a part of my soul. She's become something that protects me. I'm the most vulnerable with her. So even just something that's really slight, not even like this huge, we're not talking like infidelity or anything like crazy. Now that's an extreme, but that individual that you've been that open with can cause such damage to you because of how vulnerable you are with them, because of the degree of trust you have with them. Rob, if you did the same exact thing, I wouldn't think twice about it. If my
Sure.
wife did it, it could crush me because her and I are on a whole nother level of vulnerability and trust. So it's
Right.
one of those paradoxical anomalies that's both equally beautiful and so scary, because
Yeah.
you can almost be certain that this individual at some point is going to absolutely break your heart, either as a result of a decision or a choice that they made. They leave this world, right? You're leaving the world first. Like that's how it ends. And so you got to be almost crazy to open yourself up to that degree of vulnerability. But should you be willing to take that risk calculus,
Yeah.
what you can gain from it is unlike anything else, arguably the most beautiful thing, the most beautiful experience you could ever have in your world, if you're willing to take the risk and it works out in your favor.
Wow. It's funny. And my when we got married, my wife and I have been married for 28 years. And at our wedding, I wanted to have my dad was going to officiate, and I wanted to have a younger voice in our wedding. And so a friend of mine who was a pastor got up in front and of the church, and he said something I'd never heard said before at a wedding. And he said, "The vows you're about to say, you can't keep."
Mm.
And he said it and he paused, Nick. He was like, stopped. And you could hear a pin drop in that church, because I'd never heard someone say that kind of business in a, you know what I mean, in a wedding. And then he paused and he let it sit. And then he said, "It's only by the grace of God that you will keep these vows."
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was funny because one of the reasons I didn't understand at the time, because I wasn't married yet, he was already married. He'd been married for 2 or 3 years. And so he understood those words, like the
Mm.
depth of what you're describing in terms of this incredible thing that is also has the potential to provide incredible pain as well. It's so interesting. I want to get back to something about, because there's a part of your story that I'm curious about with, being an amputee, and the places where you have come, and you talk about vulnerability. And I can only imagine, because you and I haven't met face to face yet. And
Mm.
I'm thinking about people, even you talking about vulnerability. And Nick, quite frankly, to be vulnerable with you, when we first met, I was like, okay, Nick's an intimidating character. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna like this guy, but I'm like, because I had this perception as well in you. And so I so appreciate this conversation about vulnerability. Is your story of the amputee part of your story and your recovery and your mission now, is it something that has almost become, you know what I mean, where you tell a story about yourself so many times, you're like, is that really what's going on now? Or am I past it? It's almost like, I think about it like the first time I got a tattoo, I was like, I noticed it when I first got one, but then it just disappears.
Sure.
Like in terms of like where you are today with that whole part of your life and your mission now, like how do those parts of your story play together in who you are and who you're becoming next?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll try to summarize it concisely. Being an amputee, being someone who lost their limb in kind of an extraordinary manner, in combat, fighting the enemy, all these things, does not define me whatsoever. It will forever be a huge part of, my story, and it'll be a huge part of what I continue to leverage to provide value to others, but it's not all of me. And I say that respectfully because there's a lot of people out there that want the story. They want the action story. They want the details, this like story of, heroism and all these other things, which I totally get. I have no issue talking about it, sharing insights, answering questions. It's great. But for me, it's like this was 13 years ago. And, I spent the majority of my career as a Green Beret on one leg. And so there are moments where I'm, of course, reminded of how frustrating or painful or irritating it can be. Something simple or silly. I like trip over one of my son's Legos that arguably it wouldn't have happened had I had two functioning legs. And it's like this moment of frustration, but it's who I am at this point. And really it's who I am to most of the people around me. My
Yeah.
kids have really only known me as a one-legged guy. My wife knew me as a two-legged guy. Now she gets to spend her time with me, the one-legged guy, but it doesn't define me. I think
Yeah.
that we have an obligation. I stand by this. This may be a bold statement that regardless of the severity or the damage or how difficult or scary the situation was, the result of that scenario, we have an obligation to extract positive value out of that. And I think that that's possible under any circumstances. Now, I do realize that there's some traumatic experiences that people have been through that makes my situation look like a paper cut. Totally get it. I do think, however, with enough time and deliberate analysis and effort and work, there is positivity to extract. And you owe that to you. And potentially, should you take this approach, you owe that to somebody else. I've leveraged this experience both at the tactical level and as I've evolved as a one-legged guy in military operations and business, as a father, as a husband. I owe that to me and I owe that to you, period. But it doesn't define who I am. It's a chapter in the story. It's one that'll remain kind of a highlight. It's obviously very noticeable. I look like this big cyborg walking through the airport. I totally get that. But it's a chapter. And my responsibility is to leverage that for good and then move forward. Like, that's it. Move on. It's on to the next thing. And how do you leverage that to make yourself or others better?
That's so well said, and I so appreciate that. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and I know that, and it probably would help people if they understood, like, what is the drive in your mission now in your work with leaders across different contexts. But one of the things I know that is a part of your wiring is around, like, what goal achievement and direction look like in a person's life. And you can probably already sense that I'm very interested in paradoxes. I think if I write another book, it's going to be about all of these different tensions in the human experience that are just a reality of our lives. Because there's another part of you, and I think there's a quote I saw recently from you regarding faith. And it's not you. I think you define faith exactly the way that I do. And I like to kind of alarm people with this. Like, when we talk about faith, we're talking about belief in something that I can't prove to be true. And I think I've heard that you have said that before.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious, like, from, like, if you take it to like a business, I would suggest that every business person, even though it may not be as mission clear and direct, is trying to accomplish something. And how do you hold that tension, if you were to talk to leaders about this, between faith, you know what I mean, and this, and like not being so driven by the goal that you kind of lose yourself in the goal, but then also maintaining that sense that we know that direction matters. And I'm just curious about how you think about those two things.
Well, faith is a very powerful term that's ingrained in my day-to-day life. And what I like about the definition you just shared, Rob, which is one I typically share as well, is it doesn't speak to, God or a higher power, but for me, I'm an unapologetic Christian, for sure. And so that element of faith is deeply seated in who I am and how I live my day-to-day life. But it doesn't have to, because a definition of faith is, as you put it, simply a firm belief in something with or without proof. And that can be anything. Whether it's a desired outcome, a business outcome, a belief in yourself to achieve anything, a belief in a relationship that it could be something, a belief that it's possible to create a family, even though all the doctors said that it's impossible. Like, do you still believe in it enough to pursue it? That's ultimately the question. And so I think one thing that comes to mind, certainly in the realm of business or in team dynamics, when I say team, I don't just mean the professional setting. I also mean, maybe even more importantly, in the personal setting, like in your household.
Yeah.
team. Like we're involved in multiple different teams. Is you may have this belief in something and this vision that you have of what it could be. That's yours. And no matter how astute you are with effective communication or how magical your slide deck looks, no one will ever see that as clearly as you because it's yours. So whether you're the
Yeah.
founder of a company, the CEO of a company, the head of a household, like you've got this vision in mind. You can share that and scream from the rooftops every day on what it is. No one's ever going to see it as clearly as you do. And
Mm.
that's okay because it's yours. And so I think that to pursue something like that, certainly something worthwhile that requires an enormous amount of ambition and sacrifice and discipline and dedication, something that's almost certainly unlikely to happen in business or in life, to have that drive correlated to a belief, I don't know, I don't want to say impossible, but it's going to be really tough to make that real if you don't have those two components. And I think oftentimes those get overlooked. We get maybe stuck on the immediate gratification or, I want the visible abs. And that's just kind of where it ends. And it's like, well, why though? Like, why does that matter to you? And you keep asking that why question, which I'm enabled by both my children, 8 and 4, and they ask why about everything. And often I get to a point where I'm like, you know what? I don't know. Like it could be, why is the sun yellow? And I'm like, well, there's like fire and this. And he's like, but why? And I'm like, you know what, bro? That's a good question. Like, I don't know. I got to go do some homework. But like, take that same approach to ourselves. I want to do this or I want to become this. Okay, well, why? Well, I think this, great. Like, why? And just keep going with that. And that's going to help refine it. It brings clarity to the vision, to the belief, because at the end of the day, when you are getting your ass kicked day in, day out, as a husband, as a father, as an entrepreneur, as an aspiring author, as an aspiring Green Beret, as a what, you are going to lose multiple times. You are going to fail multiple times. It's going to hurt. It's going to be frustrating. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be all these most convincing justifications to off ramp and find that soft spot to land. Without that vision and that belief that it's possible, man, I don't want to say don't bother getting started, but I would say that is, in my opinion, a non-negotiable because that's going to be the one thing that you grab onto in those moments of failure and frustration. And if it's built on a complete and total mirage, or if it's a facade or it doesn't exist and you go to grab onto it, there's just nothing there.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. I was thinking about how in a lot of businesses that we work with, there's the necessity for measurement is important, like having some proof that something is working a certain way, or even if it's like a connection between what it is you're selling and people buying that thing, just take it very simply. But sometimes there's also what goes on within those leaders, like the inner story they're telling is also, when do I trust my gut? Like, how do I believe in this thing, but then sometimes I question it because I don't know. And I've been through this where I'm like, where is my gut telling me the truth? Is this like, what is the thing I have faith in that feels like it's such a core conviction? Will it play out the way that I hope that it does? And I hope what you just described gives people permission to feel both, to believe in something that they can't prove is going to occur and to lean into that. Because you were talking about that. I describe it as the excavation, like even in my book, the whole section on purpose is that purpose and understanding why I'm here, whether you describe it as purpose or calling, that calling on your life is a process of excavation. It's not as simple as just kind of knowing it's here, but it's like this testing and proving it and understanding it more deeply. And it takes some digging. This question of like even asking multiple times, why am I here? To get to that thing that you say, like, this is where I really do root myself.
And if I could add to that, Rob, I'll tell you from my limited experience, oftentimes that calling or that sense of purpose comes as a direct result of action. And I think that some may have that like epiphany moment where it's like, I need to be the president of the United States. And like it hits and it's like, game on. Great. I would argue that that's the minority, and the majority is the result of taking action towards something. And as a result of that, you start to feel a deeper connection with that thing, with that function, with that potential outcome. That was it for me to become a Green Beret. I mean, I wanted to be a soldier. I wanted to be a Green Beret, mostly because I was pissed off because of 9/11. That was it. And it was going to be this very short-term thing. I was going to get to the tip of the spear, kick some ass, get some payback, and get out and figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. And then I started doing it and I fell in love with it. I couldn't imagine living outside of this ecosystem. But that doesn't happen without action. So, and we talk drivers all day long, things like
Yeah.
curiosity or passion. Like, what are you just interested in? Like, oh, I wonder what it's like to go try. And then perhaps that calling comes as a result of effort, as a result of action, or as you put it, kind of like digging into that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that many kind of take this approach of they miscalculate patience for procrastination, or they see them as almost one and the same, where it's like, I need to be patient, I need to wait, and then I'll get that moment, versus procrastination, where you're just like kicking this can down the road. I'd say like patience is the recognition that good things take time. Rome wasn't built in a day, etc. But that doesn't happen without taking action towards something. And so you find yourself like almost like lost. I think there are certainly some strategies to help kind of dial in, but I think that all that remains just totally cerebral and conceptual if you're unwilling to start doing some work and then letting the results of that effort and that sweat and that blood and those tears speak to you and then help drive you towards a particular direction.
It's Nick, one of the real examples of this, and I'm being pretty vulnerable about this, but is like the fact that you're on this podcast with me. And I think about some of the people who have said yes to this conversation and people that I just couldn't have imagined saying yes. But like, to your point, you take action, and there are people who have said no, where I'm like, sometimes you get a little bit full of yourself too. And I'm like, hey, Nick Lavery said yes. Like, we've become friends. Like, why aren't you saying yes? You know what I mean? And it's and so you do get bold, but you also, sometimes you do fail. And like, people say like, no, I can't do that, or I'm not interested, or you can't even get to the person. But the action is interesting in terms of that whole call, because I don't know where our friendship goes, but I see pathways for us to serve somehow together. Maybe it's 10 years from now. Maybe it's maybe it's our children. I don't even know. But it's like responding to that call and taking a shot. It's so fascinating what you said, because it does relate to that inner self. That sense of even increasing confidence that you could do something. I want to ask, so if we could just dig into trust for a moment. One of the biggest surprises, Nick, that people have discovered, and I kind of got into the whole trust world by mistake. It was like, I was not planning to be a person whose main voice was around trust, but what it was we were having teams of people working through a process of assessments I had built, but they weren't doing leader development in a vacuum where we would send them off to a training, or they were doing this leader development together in existing teams. So people that were I often use that analogy of in their foxhole together every day. They're like doing the work together. They're trying to get something done together. And they were doing this development process in a regular cadence over their year. And what we found was that not only as we were developing leader capacity, they were getting to know each other and using just a basic fundamental language around leader development in a regular cadence. So the other thing that was occurring was they started to trust each other as they got to know each other. And so it got us deep into this dive into understanding the chemistry of trust. And with many leaders that we work with, there is a fundamental assumption. They know they can't live without trust. Like, they literally don't, their marriages fail. They won't go to the local coffee shop. They won't even walk out in their driveway. They won't drive their car down the road without trusting a stranger's not going to cross the line. And it's like, but for most of them, it feels like air. Like, it's like they reach out they know they have to breathe, but they reach out to grab it and it disappears in their hands. And so one of the big ahas is this idea that trust has a chemistry, that it has a structure, even in some of the things you've described around reliability. Like, if someone is reliable, trust increases. If they do what they say they're going to do, then I'm willing to turn my back on the enemy. And I'm kind of curious about the way that you think about trust, whether it's a military context or even as it wraps around some of the messages that you're giving to leaders. How do you think about trust today?
Oh, I'll come at this from two vantage points. One maybe more kind of operational and one maybe more tactical. I think, the classic expression, which I'm sure you've heard, is that trust is earned. Okay.
Trust all the time, right? Yeah.
There you go. Okay. I can get behind that concept. I would agree with that concept that trust is earned. The caveat I would put on that, and this applies to leadership in general, is I would suggest that that is not an even two-way flowing road from me to you. I'll use a military example. I'm the Green Beret. I'm in country X. We've got a partner force of 100.
Yeah.
And my job, our job is to lead you guys to solve this particular problem. Okay. We're on day one here. We just showed up. We just met this group. Okay. They've been vetted, they've been validated, like whatever. Here, you're good to go. Got it. We haven't had the luxury of time to establish rapport, establish a relationship, establish baseline, share values, effectively communicate. We haven't gotten the chance to do that yet. So on day one, and this obviously then happens kind of on a curve as we do move into those directions of relationship building and dynamic, et cetera, team building, interoperability, is as the leader, if I assume that role, if I choose to be a leader, I have to trust you at least a little bit from the very beginning in order for you to be able to go do anything, whether that's go sweep the rug or go grab that rifle and take up that security position right there because we're going to move to the left. Like immediately. So that trust of me is not earned by that individual from the very beginning. I would argue that that is the opposite, meaning that that individual doesn't necessarily have to trust me right away. I have to earn mine from the beginning. But as the leader, I have to assume some risk and trust you at least a little bit. And then we can both continue to earn it, quote unquote, over time. So it's not an equally flowing road initially. Eventually, we want to get to that point where we're earning it, we're continuing to earn it, we're continuing to validate it, improve it objectively, an undeniable dossier track record of my ability to believe in you and have confidence in you. But from the beginning, as you want to take a leadership role, you assume risk by virtue of deploying at least a degree of trust into those in which you have yet to build a relationship dynamic with. So I like to just share that because the trust is earned bumper sticker is captivating. I just think that as leaders, we need to be willing to recognize that we're going to assume risk, or you just end up doing everything yourself, which doesn't work, okay, in a team dynamic. Does that make sense?
So it makes perfect sense. Like
Okay.
you and I are so aligned. Holy cow. I want to ask you something about that though, and this is also an aha, like sometimes a net new for leaders that we work with around trust. Not only would I use the example of like, you don't get trust by talking about trust. You know what I mean? Like saying trust me does not make you trust me. And it's
right.
And also when this is where you and I are like separated at birth in some ways, because we think about these paradoxes. Like if you ask my wife whether she trusts me or not, here's what I think she would say. She'd say in a big T way, yeah. But with what?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's a storyline there. Like trust is perfect. It's not, sometimes we call it a dimmer switch. You were talking about like, it's not, and it also has fractures even within a day.
Sure.
There's moments where it breaks down. But I was curious about when you were describing, and the translation from a military context to a civilian context is really fascinating, because I think there are some real synergies there so what is it that causes with someone where you don't have the chance to build rapport? And I have my own theory on this that we try to talk to leaders about, that trust has a structure also. That in my book, I break it down as awareness within it matters. This is where leader development, individual development matters. Me increasing my sense of agency, my sense of competence, my sense of incompetence where I'm not competent, and that honesty about that. And then it has patterns between us. You know what I mean? The way that we interact, the way that we truth tell, the way that we are reliable together or not, and having some honesty about where that's occurring or not occurring. But it also has a structure, and that there are things at an organizational level that can increase the possibility that trust will be there even when the rapport building is not there. Would you say that that is an accurate description? If you were to step into and you're merging different groups of pieces of the military together who don't know each other, is it because of a shared belief and faith in the structure that they agree with that helps make that happen faster? What is it that allows that to occur where you trust that that person's going to go up on that hill?
Whole Leaders Wild Trust by Dr. Rob McKenna is now available through major booksellers nationwide. Debuting as a USA Today top 10 national bestseller and number 11 on the publisher's weekly list. This book, in a cultural moment defined by fractured relationships, disengaged teams, and declining institutional trust, marked a rare achievement for leadership books centered on inner work and trust building. Why does this book matter now? Organizations across sectors are navigating burnout, low engagement, and risking skepticism toward leadership. Dr. McKenna's work offers a research-backed roadmap for leaders seeking to rebuild trust from the inside out. Get your book available now through any major bookseller nationwide.
I think that having a shared understanding of the belief, the desired end state is certainly helpful. But I think if you just rely on that, then you are lightly setting yourself up for a huge failure, an actual potential disaster. I think you do boil it down to the true tactical level at some point. And I think you kind of just, a great segue with your wife is, do you trust me? And then her reasonable response could be, well, yes, but like, trust you with what? Now, that's a fair rebuttal. Trust you with what? Because if we're talking about something that she feels you know nothing about, you have yet to experience it, you have no skill, you have no competence, it would be reasonable for her to lack trust in your ability to do that thing because she's confident that you don't know how to do that thing. So, like, what exactly are we talking about? And I think that's a fair discussion if we're talking true tactics. We can talk cerebral, conceptual, strategic all day long, but if you're getting down to the nitty gritty, where it's me and my 11 boys and these 100 dudes with guns, and we just met these individuals, but there's work to be done this afternoon, what am I going to trust this person with today? I don't know anything about them, vice versa. You don't know me, I don't know you. We haven't established a baseline yet. We're going to get there, but what do I trust you with? And now it's my responsibility, risk mitigation, risk calculus, is to determine a task or a function that I can put this person or this group within, that I at least have a degree of confidence that you are capable of actually doing that. That's on me though. If I'm in a leadership or management position, I'm the one assigning the roles. Hey, go left, go right, take the high ground. You take the sniper system, you take the mortar, you take the rifle. Well, do any of these people know how to do those things? Do you even know what left means? Have you ever even looked at a mortar tube? That's not me. That's not my assessment. We can talk about preparation and skill development and the structure that I think we're kind of circling around here on how to actually employ this. But I think when it comes to the initiation of a relationship and one's requirement to deploy trust onto an individual, we have to take ownership of knowing what exactly we are trusting them to do. And if they are wildly incapable of doing so, we failed to even examine that to begin with, and that could cost you. And in our instance, that could cost you with your life. In your instance, with your wife, if she trusted you to take the kids to the soccer field and you had no idea where it was and you end up on the other side of town, like, okay, we can probably work past that. So different degrees of potential negative outcome, but I think at the end of the day, we're still talking about the same thing.
Yeah, man. Nick, I so appreciate this conversation. We went off road, and I so appreciate that. And it's funny, I'm excited for the time to talk more about the way that we're assessing trust at those three layers I described. And especially because my heart is also, working with business leaders and all kinds of nonprofit leaders, but also for our military and understanding the trust dynamic in our world today. That I'm assuming that even in a military context, that people assume that it's all locked down and it's all structured and easy. But I'm imagining that the context of our world is affecting trust in those spaces as well.
100%. In fact, I wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Rob, is two-part. Confidence, right? How would you define confidence? I don't need the dictionary definition, but like, what are the ingredients that goes into one's ability to be confident? And then how does confidence apply in a trust dynamic between two people?
Yeah. So, boy, that's a deep question. And you made me think about confidence and two sides of it. One thing that if you were to ask people in different parts of the world, including India, like what is Rob known for? What word would describe him? The word is conviction, I think is what they would say. And so that's not directly related to confidence, but it has connection, right? And I describe, conviction. I talk about that as showing up like you mean it.
Mm-hmm.
And that the root of the word conviction actually is the Greek root of it is called elencho, which means to cross-examine. So I talk to people about this reality that you don't get to have convictions unless they've been cross-examined.
Mm.
Convictions without examination are just opinions. Do you know what I mean? But that deeply
Yeah.
rooted belief in that you are going to do something, that something is important, is continually in a process of cross-examination, of questioning, of people saying, like, I don't know if this is right. But the other side of that is competence. And what's been fascinating from a trust perspective. So if I'm just kind of surrounding your word confidence with conviction and competence.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things about competence it's that's prevalent message in our world today is like that you can do anything, which is a lie. And so this we talk often about, it's why I had to create an assessment of leadership competence, is to understand what are the things that I really am good at. And like we come in full circle to your comment about leadership and management. And what are the things that I'm not good at, or that I need to get some help with? And then if we can't have an honest conversation, it's amazing how many leaders are uncomfortable with their own leadership team expressing vulnerably, that reality that I don't feel confident in this. I don't feel confident in that. And when you aren't able to have an honest and truthful conversation that is a whole conversation, then trust breaks down.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's what you were getting at in that, but it's like what we've realized is that as we put development in the hands of a person, and we actually don't tell them, we don't should them into anything. We
Mm-hmm.
invite them to actually own their own development. And what psychologists describe when they use the word confidence, they actually use a word that's even deeper, of self-efficacy,
Mm.
the belief that I could do something. And then when you increase that agency, people become more trustworthy. Not in
Yeah.
like a selfish kind of way, but this realistic view that this is what I can do, and this is what I can't.
Yeah. And I
So
bring that up because, our organization, we play around in the B2B world with leadership development and team building. And then we also play in the B2C world with personal development and the two
yeah,
different entities. And it's really fun to kind of merge those. But
yeah,
whether you're talking about organizational success, or I'm working with a 17-year-old kid who wants to be a Green Beret, or a 45-year-old soccer mom who's on that next, evolution of life, is confidence. Confidence comes up so often. It's one of these like commonly recurring concepts. And where I've landed, I'm interested in your feedback, where I've landed
yeah,
on this, because in terms of trust,
yeah,
it's difficult for me to trust somebody if I don't feel you have a degree of confidence in what it is that we're about to go do,
right,
or what you're about to go do. So your confidence in yourself increases my confidence within you, or my
yeah,
optimism, an optimistic outcome in you, because you're confident. Okay. So if we like continue to pull on that thread, okay, how does one build confidence? And where I've landed, I would love your no
yeah,
bullshit
yeah,
feedback. Where I've landed is
yeah,
in kind of three elements. One is a word that you've already said, it's the word competence. Okay.
right,
Competence or skill is a requirement, in my opinion, for confidence. Confidence is not screaming positive affirmations into the mirror. Now, that can be a useful tool. I've done that myself many times. Before I jumped out of a plane for the first time during an airborne school, I was literally in the bathroom staring at myself in the mirror, screaming, like, you can do this. Like, that's an effective technique, but I wouldn't say that that's rooted in actual confidence. Competence, your ability to be able to do something. Skill is seated in confidence, which is just earned like any other skill through thousands and thousands of hours of hammering on a craft. So competence or skill. The second is resilience. So like mental toughness.
yeah,
Okay. The ability to take some hits and figure out a way to get back up and keep going. And then the third is preparation. And when I talk about preparation, I'm talking more about like, do you have the materials? Have you done the research or the homework? If you're walking into a scary pitch meeting, do you know your audience? Do you have your deck? Are you looking the way you want to look? Like, did you do the prep work? That to me is the 1, 2, 3 punch combination of true, authentic confidence.
yeah,
Because when you're good at
yeah,
something and you know it, you're going to feel positive about going to do that thing. I've shot 10,000 free throws. I'm going to go do 10,001. I've done it 10,000 times. I've earned the skill. I've earned skill. in the absence of skill, let's say you're going to do something new that's really scary. If I have mental toughness or if I have resilience, I may not know the outcome of what we're about to do, but I know I can do hard, scary things because I've proven it over the last 10, 12 years, a track record of doing hard and scary things. I'm willing to take that risk and expose myself to the potential outcome because I've earned a degree of mental toughness. And then I've done the prep work. Like I'm ready to go. Okay.
Yeah.
So competence,
Yeah.
resilience, preparation. What are your thoughts?
It's solid. It's solid. And this is where you and I are united. I would add a couple of things to your formula.
Please.
And it's why and Sabeth's laughing as she I know she's gonna be popping back in here, is because she probably knows what I'm gonna say, is that this is why what wild leaders, wild stands for whole and intentional leader development. And when I use the word whole, part of what I mean by that is that these variables in a person's life are connected together. And so, like you're saying, like there's these different pieces of this confidence puzzle, and confidence is necessary for trust building.
Mm-hmm.
But here's another couple examples. Is one of the ways that confidence is built is through support.
Great point.
So if someone's not surrounded and has someone who's not just, and I don't mean people that are just puffing them up, but people that are giving them tough feedback on where they're missing the mark, that's a key one. Another one, Nick, that people don't think about as often is motivation. So one thing that's interesting is, and this is why we created something called the motivational drivers inventory, because people are motivated by different things. And so people will not realize where they could be competent and more confident if they haven't tapped into their unique motivations. It's funny because drive plays a role in discovery of the things that I could feel really confident about. But I don't know because it's not connected. It's fascinating. Like, for example, I'm really good at math. I just am. We have a quantitative gene in my family. I don't love math.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I could be really good at something that I'm just not driven by. And so discovering that real story of motivation actually for an individual can help build confidence in ways that are unique to them.
Love that.
So there's some good, I love what you brought up, man. That is so good. And Nick, I'm just excited for the future. It's been so fun. Our mutual friend said, "Oh, you and Nick are going to have an awesome conversation on the podcast," and it's true. So
He was right.
Rich, man.
We could do this for hours.
He was right indeed. Yes. You just opened up a whole new pathway for another wild conversation.
Yeah, we did.
So,
Oh yeah, we're
so
just getting
good.
going.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited for that next conversation. Before we round this one out, Nick, we want the people who are listening and watching to know, what is the best way for them to connect with you and the work that you're doing now? Where should they go?
Yeah, I think the easiest one-stop shop, at least to get to me directly, would be through our website. It's machine.co. Machine is spelled MCHN.co. And that's got links to all of our different personal development, products, services, ways to get a hold of me. I'm active on social. You can just search my name should you want to go that route. And I'll be looking forward to spending some time with you guys. Thank you.
Perfect. And one last wild question, Nick, are you in a season of accepting yourself or changing yourself?
I want to say I'm in a season to do both. Maybe I'm cheating. I'm living blessed every single day, but you mentioned the quantitative, I think you said gene, Rob, but I think one of the genes I have is this inability to remain satisfied, which it can be both a blessing and a curse. This insatiable drive to continue to want to be better as a dad, as a husband, as a team member, as a business operator, as a soldier. I say that while also having a huge degree of fulfillment in my life with myself and my family and my dynamic, but there's a lot of work to be done and every minute matters.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So rich. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you for listening to this Wild Conversation podcast. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.